Hi everyone, welcome to another video. Today's video is on the recent Manor Park classic car auction that happened last week. I was actually intending to go in person, but I'd also been to the H&H auction at Buxton, Derbyshire. Manor Park is probably a 6.5 hour round trip for me. I just didn't have the time, to be honest. So today's video is a run through of the auction online. I'll be showing you all the photos, etc., talking through the details of the cars, running through what they sold for, giving you my thoughts. So I'll cover the vast majority, but not all of the lots. And to give you a broad idea about the auction, there were 112 lots, 58% of those sold, so not that great. The average sale price was around about £9,800, £9,800, and pretty much a third of the ones that sold for less than £10,000. Just to give you some idea, all of the prices I'm talking about are hammer price and fees included, so all-inclusive price I'll give you. I think the fees for this auction are 12.5% plus VAT, so equivalent to about 15% on top of hammer price. So we'll run through them in lot order, and the first one up was this 2002 Porsche BOXTER, a 3.2 litre engine, 51,000 miles, pretty low miles, 4 keepers. It's not clear what history this had as I went through. It looks in fairly average condition, nothing particularly wrong, but that boot looks quite dirty and puts me off slightly, just in terms of generally how well the car may have been kept. The brake discs look a bit rusty as well to me. That sold for £4,140, so I guess fairly cheap Boxster. Next onto this 2005 Bentley ARNAGE T, 95,000 miles. It's got a good history. So this T trim introduced in 2006, 13 stamps, 3 owners, guide price of 10 to 12,000, and it sold for 15,870. I think reflective of the fact that this was very well cared for, good condition and good service history, which not all of them have, let's be honest, nowadays. So that made good money. Those rear discs look fairly rusty to me, but perhaps no problem. These had the 6.75 V8 engine. Next up, this 1982 Toyota Land Cruiser. So this is the so-called BJ42 platform. This has been fully restored from France. It looks really good. I love the paintwork. Interior looks great as well. It's had a new hood and roll cage, 110,000 miles. Guided at 14 to 16,000 pounds, but didn't sell. Next up, a VAUXHALL TIGRA. One owner, 28,000 miles, looks in great condition. I mean, one owner car of this age, this is 1998, guided at 5 to 6,000 pounds, only made 3,105. I guess they're just not very desirable. You know, without being rude, who goes to an auction looking for a VAUXHALL TIGRA? Then an interesting, slightly strange lot here, this 1961 Land Rover fire appliance. Been off the road since 2007. It's the classic 2.25 litre petrol in here, GRP bodywork. Interesting project, I suppose, no reserve, and it sold for £3,450. Another slightly unusual lot, this 1942 WILLEYS Jeep. This again looks in fantastic condition, nut and bolt rebuild 3 years ago. So looks pristine, as you can see from these photos. Guided at 20 to 22,000 pounds, which sounds a huge amount for WILLEYS Jeep, but it is a great one. Look at the engine bay, for example. It didn't sell, not surprised. Then up this 1995 VW Corrado. It's a VR6, so top of the range. These were, what, 2.9 litre, 6-cylinder engine, 190 horsepower. It's a partially finished project. 133,000 miles. You can see, I mean, look, this paintwork is really poor, very bad scratches, etc. I think this has got quite a lot to do on it. Says lots of parts have been replaced, but it's a partially finished project. So without seeing that, it's really hard to judge. I suspect these things are usually a little worse than you envisage them, if I'm honest, just from my personal experience. That was no reserve, and it sold for £2,300. Next, onto one of several MGBs. So this is a limited edition Roadster in bronze. I think these were these the run out edition ones? I'm not too hot on MGBs, I'm afraid. Lovely bronze colour though, looks really good condition. I like the interior as well. 83,000 miles, guided at 5 to 6,000 pounds, and actually exceeded that, sold for 7,130. So looks great. Look at that engine bay again, looking great. Onto quite a rare car, at least for me, a 1972 SAAB 96 with V4. It's been extensively and recently recommissioned, resprayed 18 months ago. Another one that looks really fantastic from the photos, I have to say. 1.5 litre V4 engine, made famous, I suppose, in rallying, etc. Again, this is one you'd really want to see it in the flesh to really assess it with a car this old, but guided at £5,000 to £6,000 and made 5,175. Next up, one of several 190 Mercedes 190Es. This first one is a 1986, 2 litre, 3 owners. It's got a good history, done 75,000 miles. I do like the blue interior. Probably a less desirable 2 litre rather than the 2.6, for example, that there was. Guided at £5,500 to £6,500, didn't sell. I wonder if it looks in good condition, maybe in part because of the engine, in part because there were other ones in this auction as well. Then on to a really low reserve, 2007 Aston Martin DB9. I love this colour, rare to see one in this colour, and it looks great, I think. Only 40,000 miles, unused though since 2019. 5 owners, no paperwork, recently recommissioned at a cost of £1,900. It's got lacquer peel on the paintwork, it's got the leather shrinkage on the dashboard that's classic with these Aston Martins. I suspect if you look closer in the flesh, given it's been off the road for 6 years, you may see a little more as well. Guided though, really keenly at £10,000 to £12,000. That's as cheap as I've seen any Aston Martins go. DB9s. I've seen some DB9s sell for around that money and they were pretty ropey. I think that volcano red colour will be a good selling point, and it seemed that way. It sold for £18,400, so way in excess of the guide price. Onto a totally different car, a Land Rover 1953 Series 1, 80-inch wheelbase. This is from Australia, came to UK in 2016 and recently restored. I think this isn't the most desirable version. It's not the earlier versions which command quite a bit more money. Guided at £20,000 to £22,000, unsold. The prices of these Series 1, let me know your thoughts, but seem to have really dropped in the last few years. You can pick up now a not pristine Series 1 for £10,000, £12,000. This one was obviously restored, but even so, they just don't seem to be fetching the money now. So we're on to another MGB. This one was no reserve. It's a 1976. It's got a few blemishes, over 100,000 miles on this. Looks okay from what you can see. It sold for £3,910. You can see clearly not as good as the bronze one we saw earlier. Then a 2003 E46 B3 ALPINA. Looking lovely. I love the trim, the wheels, etc. of the ALPINAs. Unfortunately, a 5-speed auto in these, so this is equivalent to the E46 M3, of course. 103,000 miles, 21 stamps. It's got some minor issues I think in the engine bay I read, some minor blemishes on the paintwork, etc. Guided at £9,000 to £11,000, which seems, I thought, a pretty fair price if you think what E46 M3s are selling for as well. I was a bit surprised this was unsold. I wonder if actually in the flesh those blemishes and slight issues that were in the description were a little worse than the photos showed. Who knows? Another MGB, 1977. This is the 2-litre engine, uprated radiator. Not really much more detail on this. It was guided at £5,000 to £6,000. Looks decent. They seem to always sell for somewhere around £5,000 no matter what. This one sold for £4,830. Then up is one of my favourite cars in this auction. This looks lovely. It's a 1974 Interceptor Series 3. It's automatic, unfortunately, but it's got £63,000 worth of bills with it. £22,000 spent in the last 10 years. This is a really great example. It looks lovely, and in that colour as well. Guided at £40,000 to £45,000. It was unsold. Again, this is another car. I look at those rear seats. Beautiful. I love it. Again, I think this is another car that probably a few years ago would have fetched that easily, but now these Interceptors, okay, maybe not as good as this, but they're selling in the 20s. And the difference between the excellent and perhaps the kind of average is definitely reducing, in my opinion. Let me know what you think. You know, a few years ago that would have sold, I'm sure, easily at that kind of money, and I'm not saying it's not worth it. It looks fantastic with that amount of history. I'm sure it was probably a good buy, but the market didn't like it at that price. 1972 T2 camper, left-hand drive, loads of history. I'd be wanting to check this underneath notorious rust buckets. It was guided at 19 to 21,000 pounds and it sold for 16,100. Several MX-5s in this auction as well. This is a 2006 2 litre, only 23,000 miles and 3 owners. No reserve, and it sold for £5,980. I reckon that's pretty good value, such low mileage. And then a lovely car here, quite a rare one, an Opel GT. 70,000 miles, loads of history going back to the 80s. This was imported from California in 1985. I think these had different engines. It's not clear what this one has. I love the styling, especially from the rear. Well, it looks great all round. Yeah, quite Corvette looking to me. I'm not sure which engine this had. I think were they a 1.1 or a 1.9 rear-wheel drive, guided at 9 to 11,000 pounds, and it sold for 12,938, so exceeding the guide there. These type of cars seem to be doing quite well, actually. Things like Datsuns, Opel Mantas, things like that seem to be selling quite well. So onto a Mini. There were also several Minis here. I won't be featuring all of them. This is a 1989 Mini Racing Green limited edition, imported in 2000. No paperwork, there is some rust on it, guided at 5 to 6,000 pounds. It's sold, I was slightly surprised at that, given the rust, etc., 5,290 pounds. Here is a 2002 S-Type R, so this was the advert said 4 litre, but I'm pretty sure this was the 4.2 litre supercharged in this. The first time this came was in the S-Type, I believe, in 2002. Correct me if I'm wrong. A significantly better engine and, of course, mated to a much better gearbox with a ZF 6-speed. As I say, let me know if I'm wrong on that, but this is described as one of the best available. It does look in fantastic condition, and it's only done 47,000 miles. That's super low mileage. Guided at 8 to 9,000 pounds, which seems pretty fair to me. I think that's a lot of car for your money still. And it was unsold. I mean, supercharged V8, 400 horsepower for that money seemed good value to me, but they just don't fetch that much money. So onto another of the 190Es. This is a 1991. This is the 2.6. 121,000 miles, so quite high mileage. The sport line as well. Not a lot of history. 3 owners. And I think fairly average paintwork. Guided at 7 to 8,000 pounds, and it made 5,520. So one of my favourite American cars, 1969 Corvette Stingray C3 generation. Looks lovely in this colour. You can see the Opel there, looking like the Opel at the back. This has the bigger 7 litre V8 engine, so 350 horsepower. That's a lot in these, isn't it? 97,000 miles, it's a manual, came to the UK in 2024 and may need some recommissioning. So it says in the advert, guided at 22 to 24,000 pounds, which seems like a pretty good buy to me at that price, even if it needs a bit of recommissioning. Again, I'd want to be looking at the underside. It sold for 25,300 pounds, seems like a fairly good buy. And here's a cute little car, 1959 Ford Anglia 100E, 43,000 miles, had an engine rebuild 10 years ago, bodywork done the year after. No reserve, and it sold for 3,910. I mean, for a fully restored and rebuilt car, that sounds cheap, but these 50s cars just don't make a lot of money now, unfortunately. So on to 1969 Jaguar 240, again fully restored, but with limited paperwork. It's guided at 15 to 17,000 pounds, which I thought sounded an awful lot of money for one of these. Let me know what you think. Even though it's fully restored and in great condition, it didn't sell. Not particularly surprising. Here's opposite extreme, I suppose. 2009 Ferrari F40. This has got the F1 gearbox. They don't actually command that much more, I think, the manuals in the F430. Only 27,000 miles, I say only, that's, I suppose, not that low for a Ferrari. Guided at 65 to 75,000 pounds. which seemed about fair to me, but that didn't sell. I wonder if a manual would have sold. They still do seem to sell a lot better. Naturally aspirated V8 still in these, of course, before they went turbo. And then a Rover P6. This is the more powerful TC version. I think it's got some damage. It's a 1972, pretty much no history. Doesn't look in fantastic condition, if I'm honest. Guided at £5,000 to £6,000 and it didn't sell. So another Bentley, a Turbo R this time. This has got 130,000 miles on the clock, sorry. Excellent history though, guided again, £10,000 to £12,000, and this one didn't sell. Despite the history, I guess it is pretty high mileage. Yeah, you can pick up a lot of car for your money now. That didn't even make 10 grand. So here's a fairly rare car, 1984 Audi 80 Sport. I love the look of this. It's a 1.8, 5-speed. It's got aftermarket suspension. It's got some paint blistering, etc. So it's not in great condition necessarily. 99,000 miles on the clock. Guided at £7,000 to £8,000, and again, that didn't sell. Onwards to this 1971 Stag. This is a restoration project, not used for 5 years. Yeah, one for the brave or someone who knows what they're doing. Quite a lot to do here, I suspect. Who knows what's hidden under here without seeing it. It's no reserve. Obviously 3-litre V8 here, sold for £3,795. And then this lovely looking 1979 Mark I Fiesta. It's a 1-litre L, so bog standard. 47,000 miles, so pretty low. Got some history, refurbished interior. It's from Guernsey, and the guide price was £5,000 to £6,000. It didn't sell. Now, I'm not that surprised. It is a lovely looking car, I like it, but it's bog standard. It's nothing special. But people seem to be trying to get quite a lot of money, and actually they're selling for quite a lot of money, what I call bog standard cars, right? You know, this isn't a Super Sport or an XR2. You know, it's perhaps the least desirable Fiesta you could get at the time. It's still a nice car, I like it, but £5,000 to £6,000 is quite a lot of money. So I'm not all that surprised that it didn't sell, to be honest. Let me know what you think in the comments. Then another Porsche. This is a 1996, so a 993 Targa. 3.6 engine. These were less than 300 horsepower. It's 106,000 miles. It's an automatic, unfortunately. Got some history, but doesn't sound like it's brilliant. It's guided at £43,000 to £47,000, and it didn't sell. Immaculately clean engine bay, but I suspect people want history. Then onto a Citroen BX 16. So this is a 1.6 engine in these. Full recent recommission. You can see the suspension working there. No reserve. I mean, I'm not surprised it only made £1,725. Probably not the most desirable car on most people's list anyway. Here's a 1974 Sunbeam Alpine Fastback. Looks pretty cool, I think. £35,000. Originally white, recently resprayed. Apparently there's a bit of a brake issue. It's got some history. Guided at £5,000 to £6,000. Another one that didn't sell. Then onto a lovely car. I really like this. 1991 Audi S2. Fairly rare cars, I guess now. 150,000 miles, so quite high mileage. These were 2.2 litre inline 5 turbo, 220 horsepower and 4-wheel drive with a 6-speed box back in 1991. Amazing. Really well looked after with 21 service stamps. Guided at £12,000 to £14,000. Another one that didn't sell, I'm afraid. And I suppose the high mileage probably put people off, I would assume. Another Porsche, 2003 Boxster, 2.7 this one, 61,000 miles. It's a manual, recent new clutch. 12 service stamps, loads of history, 3 owners, guided at £5,000 to £6,000, which looks about right considering the one we saw at the start. This sold for £8,280, so way over. Then another Corrado. This one is a G60, 108,000 miles, 10 stamps. So this was a supercharged 1.9, I think, 160 horsepower. It's got some chips and lacquer peel. Guided at £8,000 to £10,000, and it made £8,625. So here's a really great looking car. I love these old Mercedes. This is a 1966 220 SEB, 52,000 miles. It's restored over many years apparently. It looks like a superb example, got fantastic history with it. Guided at 26 to 30,000 pounds, so fairly high end, but look at that design. What a beautiful car. Love one of these. But it's another one that didn't sell, I'm afraid. And then a midget. See, lots of Bs, but not so many midgets. This is a 1500 engine in this, 90,000 miles. Apparently this is one of the last batch of 500 done in black. It's got a hard top and soft top with it. I think needs some TLC, restored back in the 90s, so who knows how rusty now. It was no reserve and sold for £1,840. That's a really cheap midget, isn't it? But who knows quite how bad that was underneath. So another cool car, I like this colour as well, 1979 Fiat X19. So these were a rear-wheel drive, 1.5 engine, 5-speed. They also did a 1300 as well, didn't they, I think, engine. Fully restored in 2018. Guide price was £7,500 to £8,500. That sold for £9,315. I think that's a good buy. It looked fantastic. It's quite a different car. You don't see many of them, and just a fun little car. So here's an XJS. You always see an XJS at auctions. Of course, this is a 1991 4-litre, very high mile, 138,000 miles, well, pretty high miles, and fairly poor bodywork, I could see from the photos. This was guided at £5,000 to £6,000. It only sold for £4,600, so perhaps not that surprising. These, poor ones of those don't seem to sell for much more than the £5,000 mark now. So here is a 1971 P5B. It's got the 4.6 V8 in this, built in 2010 with £16,000 spent back then. This was guided at £17,000 to £19,000, and I thought that was no way it would make that for that kind of car, but it made £17,250, so I was definitely wrong on that one. And then another Mini, 1977 Clubman 1100, only £26,000, but it's quite rusty. It needs recommissioning, and they wanted £5,000 to £6,000. I mean, look at the rust on this. I don't understand how anyone could expect to get £5,000 to £6,000 for this one, to be honest with you. Yeah, no way. Even that was in fairly good condition, it would probably only sell for that, I think. It was unsold, unsurprisingly. Another Vauxhall Tigra. Who sees two of these at an auction? No reserve. This is 39,000 miles, decent history, year 2000, and it sold for £2,070. And then a 1935 Lagonda Rapier. So these were a 4-cylinder, 1.1 litre engine, restored back in the 90s, owned by the same person for the last 37 years, sorry. And guide price was £25,000 to £27,000. Literally no idea how much these goes for. I don't know anything about these cars, I'm afraid. So help me out whether that's a fair price or not. It sold for way over reserve at £30,475. Here's a 1991 VW T25 Auto Sleeper Trident, so coach-built camper van. It's got 114,000 miles on it and decent history. Guided at £9,000 to £11,000. It didn't sell. Again, one I'm not that surprised about, sounded fairly high to me. So here's a pretty cool car. I actually owned one of these, Audi R8 V10 Spider. So I think this is, a facelift Gen 1 car. So this is an automatic. This was guided at £40,000 to £45,000. It's 44,000 miles, 8 stamps, decent history, and it sold for £48,850. So here's a very old Bentley 4.25 Tourer. £30,000 restoration back in the 80s, guided at £65,000 to £75,000, and it didn't sell. Again, not a car I know enough about to comment on the price, to be honest. So here's another Triumph Stag in need of restoration. Got a good history. It's hard to see quite what restoration, the extent of the restoration it needs. That's the trouble with looking at these online, of course. No reserve, and it sold for £4,370. So then a car I don't see too many of, a Vauxhall Viva. Good looking car, A rare coupe, 12 service stamps, 57,000 miles. Looks good. As I say, fairly rare to see these nowadays. Guided at £6,000 to £7,000 and it made £5,980. So on to another Mazda MX-5. Again, a 2 litre, really low miles again, crazy. 27,000 miles, 3 owners, 8 stamps, guided £8,500 to £9,500 and it made £9,660. Then onto an XKR, so this is, what's this, X150 platform. So this is again the 4.2 litre supercharged V8, 400-ish horsepower. Look at it like a lovely car, convertible. Unclear what history this has got. Guided at £12,000 to £14,000, which seems reasonable, but I suppose that's based on knowing some history perhaps. And it's unsold. I mean, it looked good condition, but if the history is dodgy, who's going to buy it, I'm afraid. Then a Mustang, never the biggest fan, but I think this one looks great. Look at that red interior. Recent engine rebuild and £6,500 spent on it this year. So 1967, 68,000 miles. It's got a manual to auto conversion, which to me is the wrong way round. A limited history, guided at £11,000 to £13,000, which I don't know Mustang prices very well, but that seems like a steal to me. And it made £16,100, so perhaps that's reflected in the price. Then a 1998 Mercedes SL, so this is an SL 320 with decent history, 118,000 miles, no reserve, and it made £3,565. Okay, that seems like decent value to me. Onto a 1989 XJR-S. So I think these were not the 6 litre engine, but a slightly more powerful version, if I'm right, with the 5.3 V12. Correct me if I'm wrong. And it's also got the TWR type body kit on it, of course. This looks in really good condition, I have to say. Looks lovely. 67,000 miles, quite low for one of these. There's that V12, and it made £10,350, which is pretty good going for an XJR. It isn't an S, of course. And onto a 1989 Porsche Carrera, 911 Carrera, 3.2 Sport Cabriolet, 24 service stamps, 101,000 miles. Looking pretty good, I have to say, in the photos. I do like this era Porsche. Another super clean engine bay, look at that. Guided at £40,000 to £45,000 and it made £48,300. Probably reflective of the fact that it had an excellent service history and it looked really, really well looked after that. Then onto a car that seems to do really well at the moment. These 60s, 70s Alphas seem to just be one of the cars that seems to be holding their values, in my opinion, quite well. So this was a 1961 Giulietta Sprint, 44,000 kilometres only. I think, was this one been in South Africa? It's got a 1600cc engine upgrade. Looks in really good condition. Guided at £26,000 to £28,000 and it didn't sell. Of course, after me saying that, typically it is one that didn't sell. I mean, looks in great condition. Maybe there was something I'm missing, but I don't think you'll find one much better, and that price seemed fairly reasonable to me. So a while since I've seen one of these at auction, a Lotus Europa Special, so mid-engine these, of course, fiberglass body, quite distinctive looking. I really don't get the looks myself, but that's just personal taste. It looks in fabulous condition, I have to say. Had the Lotus twin-cam engine, 5-speed gearbox. It's in the JPS colours, so it's the right colours. Had a respray and a full engine rebuild in 2018 with history going back to the 1980s. So it looks like a really good example. Guided at £18,000 to £20,000, but it only made £16,100. So here's a Rolls-Royce, a Silver Shadow. This has been to the UK via Spain and Jersey. It's had a full £16,000 restoration in 2018, 76,000 miles, guided at £10,000 to £12,000, and it sold for £10,925. I think that seems like a lot of car for your money. Yes, there's going to be probably some big bills, but it's been relatively recently restored. Such a lot of car for your money. Another Audi S2, 2-in-1 auction. This one's 1996 with 19 stamps and 180,000 miles. So even higher mileage than the other one. This one was guided higher as well, 13 to 15,000 pounds, and unsold. I just don't think people are going to pay that kind of money for something on 180,000 pounds. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I've bought some pretty high mileage cars. If they're looked after, it doesn't bother me a huge amount, but I'd probably bide my time and wait for one with fewer miles, to be honest. Another Bentley, 1984 Turbo R, 24 service stamps, lots of invoices, 53,000 miles on the clock, guided at 14 to 16,000 pounds, which seems reasonable given the low miles and good history, looks in good condition, but it didn't sell. You know, these seem to be really struggling to make much above 12 grand or so. Another XJS, this is the standard 5.3, been in Germany for years, got a decent history, only 51,000 miles. It was guided at 13 to 15,000 pounds. I mean, that seems way too high for me. Yes, it may be in good condition, have a good history and be low miles, but I just don't think XJSs are worth that no matter what now in today's market. Unsurprisingly, it didn't sell. Yet another Vauxhall Tigra, one keeper, 22,000 miles, 26 service stamps, guided at 5 to 6,000 pounds. It didn't sell. When you look at the others, what the others sold for, they were selling for kind of half that, so perhaps not surprising. So 1981 Scirocco Storm, look at that blue leather interior, looks great. Looks fairly worn though, I would say, in there. Less than 20 left in the UK, so it was a limited edition run, guided at 16 to 18,000 pounds, and it sold for 18,400 pounds. I'll be honest, I had no idea these were that valuable. I guess it's the limited edition run. They're not a car I find hugely inspiring myself, but let me know what you think of them in the comments. So nice little TR4 here. So this is not an A, so no independent rear suspension. Obviously the 2.1 4-cylinder engine in these. It's had 13,000 spent on it since 2018 and only guided at 10 to 12,000 pounds. Seems like good value, but it didn't sell. Then a Alphasad Sprint Veloce, 1980. This has had a bare shell restoration and engine rebuild 2,000 miles ago. Looks in really good condition, 51,000 miles. It's a 1.5 BOXTER engine, I believe these. I think it's from France, left-hand drive, obviously. Guided at 10 to 12,000 pounds. Another one that didn't sell. I'm surprised that didn't sell. I mean, I know it's left-hand drive, but it looks like one of the best ones I've seen of those, from the photos at least. And the fact it's had a bare shell restoration and engine rebuild. Yeah, really surprised that one didn't sell, to be honest. Here's a Jaguar E-type 4.2 coupe. It's got an amazing history, this one. The condition looks amazing. Description says it's excellent as well. Came back from Hawaii in 2011 as a left-hand drive, then went through a conversion to right-hand drive. Look at that engine bay, fabulous. It's had £120,000 invested in it and guided at 75 to 85,000 pounds. I mean, I think that's incredible value for something that's had that much spent on it. I mean, someone who's gone to the bother of converting from left-hand drive to right-hand drive, that will be a no expense spared restoration, won't it? 120 grand spent on it. It didn't sell. Amazing. So here's perhaps slightly the other end of the spectrum of E-types. So this is a 2+2 1970 4.2. It's called a usable example, which I presume means it's quite tatty around the edges, owned for 6 years, regularly used. Doesn't look to be anything particularly wrong with it from the photos. But this is the trouble of just looking online, right? It's called a usable example, so clearly it's rough around the edges. The guide price was 28 to 32,000 pounds, which is quite low for an E-type, as you know, but it didn't even sell for that. So I think it must have been a lot rougher around the edges than was visible from the photos. So a Mercedes SL 350, so the 3.7 inline 6 in these. And this was a 2004, 71,000 miles, owned for 10 years, not a lot of history, but no reserve, and that sold for £5,980. Onto a Triumph Spitfire 1972. Apparently the clutch needs attention. It's on 93,000 miles, guided at 7,000 to 8,000 pounds, and it sold slap bang in the middle for 7,500. Looks in pretty clean condition. Then onto the most ridiculous car, I think, in the auction. So a Dodge Ram. This is an SRT 10. Not a fan of these American pickups myself, just not my taste. This is 2005. What I do love about it is the fact that it's got a nuts engine in. So this is the Viper 8.3 litre V10 engine in, which is just ridiculous. So you can see there, it's actually got Viper on the V10 engine. Totally absurd car, and I love it for that. That engine is amazing. I know someone with a Viper, it's just epic. That was guided at 25 to 27,000 pounds. It sold for 21,275. And then another SL350, another one from 2004, similar kind of miles and 10 stamps as well, 95,000 pounds. But that was guided at 5 to 6,000 pounds and didn't sell. So I'm not sure what I'm missing there. I'm not quite sure why that one didn't sell. Here's an interesting little car. So a 1975 Golf Swallowtail, so one of the earliest Golfs. This is a full nut and bolt restoration, had 3 owners, only 53,000 miles. I think this was at a previous Manor Park auction. Certainly I've seen it in another auction in the last few months. Guided at 15 to 17,000 pounds, and again, it didn't sell. So yeah, I'm surprised that one's struggling so much. It looks really good condition. I mean, full restoration, it looks pristine. And here's a Defender 2016, so one of the last year of Defenders, double cab, which are never that popular. 3 keepers, 86,000 miles, guided at 20 to 22,000 pounds. Rear cross member looks like it could do with some attention. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable guide price. It didn't sell though. For a last year Defender, quite surprising. I think that would have sold if it hadn't been a double cab. In my opinion, they just don't fetch the money because they're just not so popular. Is that missing an engine cover as well, which seems a bit weird to me? Not that it's necessarily an issue, but it's just perhaps it's just a general impression about how well cared for it is. I'm assuming that has an engine cover. I'm not familiar with the latest Puma engine Defenders, really. So here's another Alfa, an Alfa Sud, 1982, it's a 1.3, been in storage for the last 13 years or so, only 17,000 miles. It was sold with no reserve and sold for £5,405. I think that looks like a great buy, but who knows what problems you might find if it's been off the road for that long. On to another MGB Roadster. So this is an earlier 1962, so nice chrome bumpers here, looking lovely condition, reconditioned gearbox. It's got the 5-bearing engine, 73,000 pounds. Yeah, it does look good, this one. 10 to 12 was the guide price, and it sold for £10,350. So this is an early RX-7, Mazda RX-7. So this is 1986, 86,000 miles. These of course had the rotary engine, 1.3 rotary engine in these. Guided at 12 to 14,000 pounds. I think this is non-turbo era still, correct me if I'm wrong. It didn't sell. Quite rare to see this generation of RX-7. I have to admit, I've got no idea what they usually sell for. Here's a 2003 Land Rover Discovery with a 4-litre V8, so that's fairly rare in itself. It's got a good spec, well cared for by the looks of it, only 68,000 miles. Guided at 13 to 15,000 pounds. It does look really good condition, but I don't think I've seen a Discovery sell for anywhere near that kind of money, even with a V8 and even in good condition. Let me know what you think, but not surprisingly, it didn't sell. So a Fiat 1900A from 1952, another car I'm afraid I don't know very much about. I think these obviously a 1900cc engine, hence the name. 44,000 miles, classic 50s interior, look at that, beautiful. Guided at 7 to 8,000 pounds, and this was unsold. Then on to a TR6, 1971, this one, 83,000 miles. It looks in fairly good condition. Guided at 10 to 12,000 pounds, which seems pretty reasonable to me, but again, unsold. So I'm not sure if perhaps the photos weren't telling the whole story here. Frog Eye Sprite, very distinguishable car from 1960. It's had a retrim and restoration. That red interior looks great in 2014 and only done 1,000 miles since. Loads of history. It was bought for £21,000 in 2016 and the guide price here was £12,000 to £14,000. It sold for an undisclosed fee, so I assume substantially less than £12,000. So you could say that that's potentially half the value it was bought for in 2016, and maybe that's a good barometer of the prices over the last decade of those kind of 50s, 60s cars. So interesting car here, a Mark V Cortina. I bid on this car, Anglia car auctions, was this in, oh no, I can't remember. Was it in the January auction of this year or was it the end of 2024? I honestly can't remember. Interesting, I spoke to the guy, I see him at the Anglia car auctions actually a few times. He restored this, it's from South Africa, put an Essex V6 in it, so it's a 3-litre S evocation, I suppose you'd call it. He's done a great job and I love it. It's been modified, it's on aftermarket springs, it's got a totally different interior. I don't know why it appealed to me, perhaps partly because my dad had a Mark V Cortina when I was young. I'm not usually a massive fan of them. I just like these kind of modified cars sometimes. It just appealed to me for some reason. Anyway, I bid on it at Anglia and I think I had something like 8,000 with fees as my limit and I think it sold for 8.5. I bid on it again here and it went for about the same and I dropped out. So an interesting car. I loved the blue leather interior. Yeah, really nicely done, I have to say. It featured in a magazine. It was an excellent restoration. And you know, a modified Essex V6 in it as well. It sounds great. I opted out. I'm kind of glad I did because it's just the time and effort and hassle that I'm extremely busy at the moment. I just didn't have the time to sort this out. So, or as much as I'd love it, probably a blessing in disguise. So another XK. This is a naturally aspirated XK so with the 4.2, no supercharger. It looks in great condition. It's the right colours. This is a really popular colour choice with the interior and exterior. 13 stamps, 2 owners, and these seem to sell just as well as the supercharged ones now. Convertible, of course, guided at £10,000 to £12,000, and it sold slap bang in the middle, really, £11,500. Another Bentley, an ARNAGE T500 Mulliner. So this was a 500 BHP job, hence the name. 9 stamps, great history. Lovely looking car, guided at £24,000 to £26,000 and it sold for £25,875. Yeah, that's the one you want with 500 horsepower, at least in my book. Escort 1.6 Finesse. This is a real kind of bog standard car. I think this was a barn find as well. No reserve and it sold for £1,030. Bit of work for someone to do there, I think. So here's a Caterham 2000. So this is a Rover engined 1.8, about 150 horsepower, which is, still reasonably quick in something that light. 24,000 miles, guided at £14,000 to £16,000. These hold their money so well, and it sold for £13,225. Another Rolls Royce, so this is a Silver Spirit 2. Look at that red interior, amazing. Yeah, 22,000 miles only 2,000 miles in the last 20 years. I think that's put in there as a selling point, but that kind of makes me nervous. I want a car that's been ticking over at 1,000 miles a year or something to keep everything working. To me, 2,000 miles in 20 years is actually a put off. Guided at £8,000 to £9,000 and it sold for £9,200. So here's a 380 SL 1980. So this was the 3.8 litre V8 in here. Lovely blue interior. Definitely an 80s car. Guided at £18,000 to £20,000. I'd be wanting to check this out thoroughly for rust. It didn't sell. It looks in fairly good condition from the photos. And the guide price seems reasonable if it was in very good condition, but it's not clear to me how good that condition is from the photos. Here's a 1990 Alfa Romeo Spider, 2 litre, from the Isle of Man and 114,000 miles on the clock. This was guided at £12,000 to £14,000 and it made 10,000. Onto a Daimler. So this is a Daimler V8 250, owned since 2014 and guided at £8,000 to £9,000, which seems like reasonable value to me, but it didn't sell. Another unsold. Again, slightly hard to say how good or not the condition is from just looking online. So here's another of the 190Es. This is apparently the best the auction house has ever seen. In 1991, it's from Japan. Often they are very good condition from Japan. Again, love that blue interior. It's only a 2 litre though, unfortunately. Guided at £6,000 to £7,000, which actually seems pretty reasonable with low mileage and if it really is that good condition, but it didn't sell. Would that have sold if it was a 2.6? I don't know, but I was a bit surprised that didn't sell. Here's a mini hill climb spec mini with a 1330cc engine. Yeah, I mean, I think these types of cars that are extensively modified for race or hill, you get so much for your money. Someone spent a fortune on this car. It was guided at 7.5 to 8.5 and it sold for 6,210. It's a lot for your money. Here is an E30 1990 318i, owned for 10 years, it's the Lux, and 115,000 miles on the clock. So these E30s, this is a, fairly bog standard. Well, these are 4-cylinder, of course, and they're still selling for loads of money. It was guided at £6,000 to £7,000, and it sold for 7,188. So these E30s still seem to be selling for great money, no matter what model they are, almost. Onto a Morgan 4.4 from 1979, guided at £9,000 to £11,000. I think this is probably not the best, a bit rough around the edges, it's fair to say, perhaps, and it was unsold. Yeah, definitely slightly rough around the edges looking at these photos. Here's a lovely car, 1975 450 SL, so a slightly bigger V8 than we've seen in the previous one, 80,000 miles, loads of history, guided at 14 to 16,000 pounds. It didn't sell, yet another one didn't sell. I mean, the guide price looks fairly reasonable. I guess, again, the photos don't tell you. I've looked at some of these guided at those prices and I've looked underneath and the seals are totally rotten. So, yeah, it's hard to say why it didn't sell because that guide price looks reasonable if it's really good, if the history really was that good. Another hill climb spec mini, road legal, this one, even more kitted out. 8,000 to 9,000 was the guide price and it sold for £6,900. I mean, you've got a race car already done for you here for under £7,000. That seems like remarkably good value to me. Yet another 190E. So this is a 1.8, one owner, 19 stamps, so really well looked after, 117,000 miles, guided at £4,500 to £5,500. Seems like really good value to me. And it didn't sell again. I was really surprised. I thought these 190Es would be more popular, but they were really struggling to sell. So another Mark V Cortina, 2-litre GL, 88,000 miles, 1981 this one, guided at £7,500 to £8,500. And guess what? It's another one that didn't sell. So then onto an Audi RS6. This car has been in, I think it was in the last Manor Park auction and obviously didn't sell. So I've got one of these in saloon format. This is 130,000 miles. It's got a good service history. It says the interior could do with some updating, some refreshing. I'm not quite sure what that means. It doesn't look bad from the photos, and that just shows, the auction house is saying it needs attention. I can't see anything wrong with it, but clearly there's something wrong with it. Guided at £7,000 to £8,000, I think that's great value for an RS6, even though it's fairly high mileage. Problem with these, you want to see it working, you want to know that that gearbox is working all right, and it is a problem with those, particularly at high miles. And it's unsold again. So 1974 MGB GT, full restoration 10 years ago, looks a really nice example. I would actually have this in white, perhaps. One of the few cars I might. Looks good. And that's guided at £5,000 to £6,000, despite having a full restoration and looking in really good condition. Sold for £6,325. I think that's great value. So there you go, a quick run through of almost all the lots there. As you can see, quite a lot didn't sell, and even those that I thought were pretty fair, good guide prices, still not selling. So the market's certainly struggling a bit. We all know that. My next auction video will be a live one from Buxton, H&H, so watch out for that, and thank you very much for watching.